Andrew Mason loved chasing sensational stories. The dirtier, the better. He had already explored abandoned asylums, filmed skulls in catacombs, and choked on mould in flooded tunnels. The Rothwell maternity hospital was supposed to be his next checkmark. Andrew Mason. 30 years ago, strange births, mass deaths, infant disappearances, shut down under the label classified. The town was small, dying, perfect for setting the atmosphere. His editor had promised him a $5,000 bonus for real horror photos, recordings, anything that could be passed off as an authentic event. Andrew smirked, remembering how his colleagues had tried to warn him. Colleague 1, even cell service dies there. Colleague 2, locals stay away. Some who went in didn't come back quite right. He didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in the clicking of a camera shutter and view counts, and the stench that hit his nose the moment he crossed into Rothwell was nothing but a pleasant lure. It meant the material was going to be even better. The asphalt cracked beneath his wheels like old skin. On either side of the road, rotting trees stood with branches twisted into grotesque fingers as if trying to snatch the car as it passed. The stench of decay seeped through the closed windows. It wasn't the sweet rot of a dead animal. It was heavier, stickier, with an undertone of something human. Andrew Mason entered Rothwell with an empty gas tank, trembling fingers, and the bitter aftertaste of cheap coffee on his tongue. This town reeked of death. He abandoned his car next to a leaning, peeling sign, "Welcome to Rothwell, population 512. Someone had crossed out the number with thick black paint. Beneath it, written in small, shaky handwriting, "Leave." Andrew smirked. Signs of fear were always a good sign for a reporter. He stepped out of the car. The air hit him full in the face, thick and sticky, as if someone had pressed a rag soaked in rotten blood under his nose. The road to the maternity hospital led through deserted streets, abandoned houses with rotting facades, windows hastily boarded up, as if people had desperately tried to block out something alive. On one fence, a piece of cloth flapped weakly in the wind. It was soaked in some kind of slime, trailing a hardened streak across the ground. Flies swarmed around the dark sludge. Andrew shuddered but moved on. His footsteps slapped wetly against the damp asphalt. At the crossroads, an old woman stood. Her face was a network of deep wrinkles, her eyes sunken far into her skull. As Andrew passed her, she whispered, "Old woman, you don't belong here." Her breath smelled as if decay had started from within. Andrew quickened his pace. The maternity hospital loomed ahead, grim and twisted, as if the very air was trying to push its walls back into the earth. The paint was peeling, the windows shattered. On the porch, someone had left a rusted doll, eyeless, its stomach torn open, stuffing oozing out like mouldy slime. Underfoot, the ground squelched, a mixture of wet leaves and something meaty that resisted the pressure of his boot. Andrew swallowed hard. The stench inside the building was different, not just decay. Something warm, something alive but broken, seeped through the cracks in the walls. He switched on his flashlight. The beam tore through the darkness, revealing peeling walls, black mould stains, and streaks of strange yellow-green fluid hardened into vein-like patterns across the floor. Andrew stepped inside. The floor gave a sound beneath his foot, like stepping into sour, spoiled dough. From deep within the building came a faint, almost inaudible sound, not moaning, not the creak of wood, a wet, sucking sound, as if someone was struggling to breathe through mucus-choked lungs. Andrew steeled himself. He didn't know he had already crossed the line, that the first warm breath of infected air he inhaled was the beginning of his end. Andrew walked down the corridor, his boots sinking into the settled slime. Blotches swelled on the walls, resembling old abscesses. In places, the skin of paint had cracked, revealing the wet, raw core of the plaster beneath. His flashlight jittered in his trembling hand. It had been only 10 minutes since he had entered the maternity hospital, but already it felt like time here followed different laws. The silence was heavy, as if life itself had long ago suffocated in this place, leaving behind only a rotting, decaying shell. Medical folders lay scattered on the floor, their pages stuck together from moisture. On the covers, faded names could barely be read. Johnson, stillbirth; Garcia, postpartum infection, fatal; unnamed, fetal deformation. Some pages were stained with something sticky and thick to the touch, like dried blood mixed with dampness. Andrew grimaced, wiping his palm on his jacket, but curiosity outweighed disgust. He picked up one of the folders. The pages crackled as he turned them. On one page, a black and white photo was pinned, a blurry silhouette in a medical room. Something resembling a child, but with an elongated skull and a mouth split nearly to the ear. On the back of the photo, someone had scrawled in thick black ink, "Do not let them sprout." Andrew felt a shiver run down his spine. He tossed the folder aside and moved on. The corridor led to an old operating room. The door was half torn from its hinges, its surface covered with brown streaks, as if something had clawed at it from the inside. He pushed the door open with his shoulder. A new stench hit him, thicker, more cloying. It smelled of rotting milk, warm slime, something festering inside a decaying womb. Scars stretched across the floor, as if something heavy and slick had crawled here, leaving behind thin, bloody grooves. Something shifted on one of the surgical tables. Andrew froze. The flashlight beam caught a dirty sheet stretched over a mound that slowly rose and fell, as if breathing. He took a step closer. At that moment the sheet slid off, revealing its contents, the body of an infant fused with something that looked like a limp, swollen umbilical cord, endlessly long and covered with grotesque growths. The body was grey like fatty meat. Its eyes were open and cloudy, its mouth twitching spasmodically as if trying to swallow. Andrew instinctively stumbled back, tripping over a broken spool of medical tubing, and then he heard it. A whisper, not words. Sounds, sucking, slurping, muffled weeping. From behind the wall where the nursery used to be. The wall trembled. Slowly, as if something inside it was trying to break free. Andrew didn't want to go there. Every cell in his body screamed at him to turn and run, but he kept walking step by step. His flashlight caught a crack in the wall, and from it oozed something viscous and whitish, like breast milk mixed with pus. Within it, tiny forms took shape. Fingers, lips, closed eyes. He nearly vomited again. As he passed, one of the forms twitched. A tiny hand reached into the air, blindly groping for something to hold on to. Andrew quickened his pace. He stumbled into what used to be the newborn ward, and he saw her. On the far wall, a woman had merged with the stone, her body unnaturally stretched and flattened, as if fused into the surface itself. Her chest and belly were covered in growths, hideous, pulsing under the skin like monstrous fruits. Her face was partially human. One eye remained clear, while the other wept thick yellow pus. The remnants of her lips twitched, making a wet slurping sound. "Mother, Mama." It wasn't a voice. It was the movement of flesh, transmitting sound directly into the bones. Andrew froze. Suddenly tentacles burst from her body, meaty, slimy, laced with black veins. They slid across the floor, grabbing at debris, groping the air. He stepped back, but one of them wrapped around his boot. The slime immediately began soaking into the fabric, and where it touched his skin, an itching began, not on the surface but deep under the skin, as if tiny worms were crawling inside him. Andrew screamed. He yanked his foot free, tore off the boot and flung it aside. The flashlight slipped from his hand. In the darkness ahead there was a wet splashing sound, and again, "Mother, Mama." The voice was softer now, almost pleading. And he understood. She was calling to him, not with words, with her monstrosities, with her eternally pregnant, never-healing womb. Andrew scrambled for the flashlight and saw that from the walls, from the floor, from the very air, faces were emerging, infantile, female, twisted by agony, all of them staring at him. The flesh, the children, and the mother herself were waiting for him to take a step closer. Andrew ran. He sprinted through the corridors, his flashlight bouncing wildly in his hand, tearing grotesque, oozing images out of the darkness. The floor beneath him breathed. Each step was met with a shudder, as if he were running over the spine of a living creature. He was gasping for air. The stench, milky, rotten, caustic, burned in his lungs. In one of the narrow passages he stumbled over something soft and fell into a sticky, squelching mass. Through the thick layer of slime, like murky water, he saw movement, tiny hands, wrinkled heads, distorted faces of infants trapped within the walls. He scrambled to his feet, tearing the slime off his jacket, off his skin, and then it began. At first, it was just an itch. Thin waves of warmth and faint tingling coursed under his skin, as if following his veins. He ignored it, kept running. But the itch grew stronger. The skin on his arms began to swell, covered in tiny blisters. Andrew stumbled, pressing his hand against his face, and felt his skin move under his fingers, not just vibrate. It was crawling, as if thousands of tiny worms were burrowing under his epidermis, swarming, searching for a way out. He screamed. He yanked a utility knife from his pocket, slashed blindly at his arm. Blood spurted, but it wasn't just blood or air that escaped from the gash. A tiny, writhing limb, dry, greyish, coated in slime. He nearly retched. From the new cut oozed a yellowish fluid, filled with tiny tissue fragments, as if he had sliced open a womb rotting with fetuses. Andrew staggered back. On his left arm, a new growth began to form, at first the size of a pea, then a fist, then larger. From it sprouted embryonic fingers, tiny mouths opening and moving in silent cries. His body was giving birth from itself. Andrew smashed the growth against the wall, howling, clawing at it with his nails until the flesh began to tear off, leaving wet, bloody streaks on the walls. But new swellings were already moving up his neck, across his ribs, across his stomach. With every heartbeat, a new life was born under his skin, a life that didn't belong to him. He collapsed to his knees, choking on the stench. His body had become a warm incubator for something horrible, alien, and somewhere deep in his mind, he heard the rustling voice of the mother. "Don't be afraid, we will embrace you." Pink slime oozed from his ears, his vision blurred. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, everything became soft, trembling, as if he were inside a womb. The first tendrils reached for him from the darkness, wrapping around his ankles, his calves, his shoulders. He choked on his own screams, but no one could hear him. Only the flesh, only the mother, only those who whispered from within his own skin. Andrew screamed as new tendrils burrowed into his flesh. He could feel something spreading through his body, feel his skin yielding, opening, becoming something foreign, and then everything snapped. He woke up on the floor, in the dark, alone. His chest pounded wildly, sweat streamed down his face. His left arm was bloody, the cut from the knife fresh and burning, but there were no writhing growths, no embedded infants, only a dirty rag lying nearby, reeking of dampness. Andrew coughed and forced himself to stand. His flashlight lay close, slightly cracked but still working. Its beam tore through the darkness, revealing peeling walls, just the ordinary abandoned remnants of a forgotten building. No slime, no flesh, no mother. He stood inside the old maternity hospital, ordinary, dead, rotted to its very bones. Andrew tried to recall what had happened. His head throbbed with a dull, heavy pain. Dreams, hallucinations, mould poisoning. He cursed under his breath and moved toward the exit. The corridors were empty. Silence rang in his ears. Only the crackle of his own breathing and the faint echo of his footsteps. Andrew reached the main entrance and froze. The door was chained shut, a rusted chain wrapped around the handles, the padlock hanging heavily, as if someone had sealed it from the inside. He tried the nearby windows, shattered, but beyond them, a solid wall of bricks, brickwork up to the very ceiling, as if someone had entombed the building from within. Andrew searched floor after floor. Every exit was blocked, every path outside was gone. The hospital had become a trap. He returned to the central wing. On a wall he hadn't noticed before hung an old bulletin board, blackened flyers, torn notices. One of them caught his eye, a note written in a trembling hand. "The fetus must mature. We cannot let it be born prematurely. The time is coming. Watch the mirrors." Andrew felt a chill crawl up his spine. He turned to the nearest mirror, cracked, filthy, and for a split second he thought he saw something looking back at him from the cracks, something that wasn't his reflection, something waiting. He stepped back. He needed to understand, find a way out, figure out what had truly happened. He noticed faint tracks on the floor, dry, barefoot prints leading deeper into the hospital. Not wet, not slimy, but still wrong. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and followed them. There, in the heart of the abandoned maternity hospital, the answers were waiting. Andrew followed the tracks, step, another step. The corridors were empty, but the air was growing heavier. It thickened, clinging to his face, making every breath a struggle. He reached a locker room, a wide, empty hall lined with long rows of metal lockers, their paint peeling, their surfaces rusted. Somewhere deep inside the room, a sound echoed, droplets falling with tortuous regularity. Drip, drip, drip. Andrew wiped his forehead instinctively. His hand came away wet. Then he realized. It wasn't sweat. A sticky film had surfaced on his skin, like a thin layer of slime. It carried a faint, milky odour, disturbingly familiar from his earlier nightmare. But it was just a dream, right? He hastily wiped his face with his sleeve. The slime disappeared. His footsteps echoed through the empty room. In the mirror of one locker, he caught a glimpse of his reflection. Andrew flinched. His reflection stood wrong. The head tilted at an odd angle, the shoulders slumped unnaturally low, as if someone was perched on his back. He blinked. The reflection snapped back to normal. Only a faint bead of thick fluid dripped from the chin of the reflected Andrew, leaving a blurry trail. He turned away. Andrew Mason, hallucinations, mould, toxic exposure. It's all in my head. He found a staircase leading downward, to the basement. The air there was thicker, darker. With each step downward, it felt as if the walls were growing softer, more yielding. As if recently coated with warm, viscous mud, Andrew stumbled, catching himself with a hand against the wall. The wall pulsed. He jerked his hand away. Just an ordinary wall, cold, dry. He gave a shaky laugh. Andrew Mason, all in my damn head. And then a voice, soft, female, whispering almost against his ear, "Mother, no." Andrew turned. Nothing, only the faint echo of his own breathing. The basement was filled with old catalogues, dead archives. Dust danced in the beam of his flashlight. On one of the shelves he found a file folder, yellowed with age, smudged with dirty fingerprints. He opened it. Photographs, ultrasound images, dozens, hundreds, far too many. Every infant in the images was wrong. Twisted skulls, deformed spinal cords, extra limbs. Each picture was attached to a card labelled "Not permitted for birth." On the back of every card was a burned-in seal, a blotch with a fraying edge, as if the very paper had tried to flee from the brand. Andrew felt the ground tilt under him. His stomach heaved, and he fought the urge to vomit. He staggered back, stumbled, and slammed into the wall. And the wall moved. He could feel it. The skin of the wall quivered against his back. Tiny pores opened, and from them minute tendrils emerged, barely visible, like microscopic hairs. They brushed, caressed, inhaled the scent of his flesh. He leapt away, clutching the flashlight in panic. But when he turned, everything looked normal again. Dry, peeling wall. Only now there was a faint mark left behind. The outline of his own body, as if stamped there by warm, dirty hands. And in his mind the same voice whispered again, "Mother, you will ripen for us." Andrew bolted back toward the stairs. But when he emerged at the top, the corridors were different. They weren't just ruined, they were alive. The walls trembled softly like an organism asleep and breathing. Somewhere ahead a faint light flickered, and Andrew understood there was no way out. He had already begun the transition. Andrew sprinted down the corridor, but with every step the ground beneath him changed. The floor's asphalt began to swell, forming bulges like cursed skin infested with parasites beneath the surface. From the walls stretched wet seams like torn muscles. Dark liquid trickled down them, dripping from the ceiling, reeking of decaying milk. And everything around him breathed, the walls, the floor. Even the air seemed to pulse in rhythm with some invisible heart. He burst into the central hall and froze. The walls, once covered in peeling wallpaper, were now spreading with living tissue, translucent, laced with blood vessels through which thick black blood sluggishly flowed. And from that flesh, shapes were being born. Tiny ones, slowly writhing. He saw one of the shapes tear through the membrane of the wall, like a fetus breaking through the amniotic sac. A small hunched creature oozed out, leaving a trail of slime behind. Its body was coated with folds of excess skin that merged into the floor. No sooner had it emerged than it tried to stand on its tiny legs. It collapsed. It whimpered, and immediately tendrils rose from the floor, wrapping around it, pulling it back into the fleshy mass. It was not fit, it was defective, and the flesh would not show it mercy. Andrew tore his gaze away, but wherever he looked more appeared, embryos with gaping mouths, infants with two faces, bodies covered in tiny hands and legs like clumps of seaweed. Some survived. They twitched feebly, clinging to the walls, to the floor. They were searching, and he knew for whom. Andrew squeezed his eyes shut, clutched his head. He wanted to wake up, to return to the grey, ruined hospital, but when he opened his eyes, it was worse. His own fingers, swollen, slick, were wriggling under the skin, small lumps shifting and moving. The skin on his wrists was swelling, splitting open, revealing tiny white eyes peeking out. His body was blooming with the same grotesque fruits that sprouted from the walls. He screamed, but his voice blended with the many-voiced moans of the entire maternity hospital, the cries of mothers, children, unborn and dead. The city of flesh was claiming him, consuming him, preparing him for a new birth. And then he saw her, the mother. She stood in the centre of the hall. Her body was larger than human, twisted, cracked, from which new tiny lives burst forth. She reached out to him instead of fingers, a bundle of umbilical cords, wet and bleeding, and in her eyes, one glowing yellow, the other oozing pus, there was tenderness, an invitation. Mother, come back to us, become part of the family. Andrew stumbled, falling to the floor directly into the sticky flesh. His skin touched the surface, and he felt warm, hungry paws drinking in his sweat, his blood, his very essence. A little more, and he would become part of this living tissue, one of its cells, one of its children. He roared in terror, gathered the last remnants of his strength, and tore himself free. The corridors were moving, the walls closed in, forming new exits and dead ends. The hospital didn't want to let him go. It needed him. He was the perfect fruit. Andrew ran. He could no longer feel his legs. The floor beneath him was soft, like the tongue of a dead animal. Every step grew harder, as if a sticky, formless mass was sucking him in. Around him, from the walls, from the ceiling, from the very air, new bodies kept emerging, writhing, crying. Tiny hands reached out for him. Creatures, stay! Creatures, we need you! He stumbled, collapsed onto his knees. Hands rose from the floor and seized him, not harshly, gently, tenderly. Like a mother holding a child's hand, he tried to fight back. He clawed, bit, screamed into the twisted faces of the creatures. But his strength was slipping away, and the mother was approaching. Her enormous shadow crawled along the walls, her broken, deformed body weeping fruits that slid down her sides like tears. She descended toward him, and he saw her face up close, not demonic, not monstrous. The face of an old woman, exhausted, worn, suffering. The face of someone who could not die, who was forever giving birth, forever feeding, forever rotting. She bent down toward him and touched his forehead with her umbilical fingers. Andrew choked. He felt his body surrender. His skin softened, began to melt, to slide off his bones. His bones twisted under their own weight, becoming a viscous frame. His ribs cracked and spread outward, forming a new fleshy sac. From his stomach sprouted new growths. Not arms, not legs, but something else, meant not for motion but for carrying life. He screamed. His mouth stretched to his ears, his lips split open, and from his throat spilled a slimy loop of a newborn umbilical cord. The last thing that remained in his mind was a name, Andrew Mason. He repeated it over and over, desperately clinging to it, clinging to who he was. But the name melted, like ice under a black sun, and in its place other words crept into his consciousness: fruit, nourishment, family. And with each new pulse of the enormous mother's heart, Andrew felt his last thoughts sink into the viscous, rotten darkness. He was no longer human. He was a part, a tiny cell of the eternally starving flesh. Somewhere far away in the ordinary world, the sun rose over Rothwell, but no one noticed how, deep within the old maternity hospital, a wall trembled. A new living bulge, full of squirming embryos, and in their tiny, eyeless faces something new could already be seen. Something fresh, something that had once been called Andrew.